what I saw was people from all walks of Indian society. I saw, like poor people, middle class, very. I met lawyers. It was all segments of Indian society, from what I see, were rising up to help the street dogs. Sterilizing, uh, government support. I mean, you can see from the coverage and stuff. It's like a war between humans. I mean,
Yeah.
there's two different sides. The only way to fix it is to have collaboration. It was, without any exaggeration, one of the most haunting places I've ever been in my life. I was there the Saturday when the protests were at their highest, and I heard the dogs screaming.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Hindustan Times, and my name is Aisha Varma. Canines, cruelty, and caregiving. That's going to be the topic of the conversation today. We actually want to welcome a guest to this broadcast. Particularly, we want to welcome Mr. Niall Harbison, who is joining us at this very moment. Mr. Harbison, thank you so much for taking out the time to speak with us.
Thanks for having me.
First things first, you made a trip to India over the weekend. Why did you come to India? What brought you here?
Well, I'd seen all the Supreme Court ruling, and I follow a lot of pages on Instagram, probably like a lot of people, dog pages, and I saw all these things start popping up, and I sort of understood it, but I said to myself, I better go there and just have a look to really see what's happening, because there seemed to be all this conversation around street dogs, and that's my mission in life, is to save street dogs. So I decided to go to Delhi for myself and see what was going on.
And what did you end up seeing when you were here?
Well, I knew that actually the day that I arrived, the Supreme Court judgment was changed on Friday. Was that? Yeah, Friday. And I saw a lot of jubilation and a lot of excitement, but I sort of was thinking to myself, just as an outsider, I was like, wow, that sounds like it's, maybe a good thing, but I don't know what the practicality is on the ground. And I spent the whole weekend just talking to feeders, and I was in a place called Rohini where there was some protests about a shelter or a sterilization center, and just really got to understand what the problems were on the ground, and how vast the street dog issue is in Delhi.
So you've been able to interact with feeders. You've been seeing what the situation is on the ground, especially I think it's been in the spotlight because of what's been happening with the Supreme Court rulings. What is the difference, say, because you run a shelter in Thailand? You've been working there for years. You know what the infrastructure is like there. When you compare that to the kind of infrastructure for stray animal care in India, what are the biggest differences that you see?
Well, I think the care for street dogs is not fantastic in Asia in general, or this part of the world, let's say. What I saw in Delhi was an unbelievable group of people who were very dedicated, but more individuals. I thought there would be more larger charities or NGOs or more structure around the system, but it wasn't. It felt like just a collection of very passionate, dog lovers, really, and they were from. What I saw was people from all walks of Indian society. I saw, like poor people, middle class, very. I met lawyers. It was all segments of Indian society, from what I see, were rising up to help the street dogs, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of infrastructure or support there for the street dogs, if I'm honest.
That's quite interesting. One thing that a lot of people are talking about when it comes to the recent Supreme Court ruling is the fact that they've said that there is going to be the municipal corporations essentially have been ordered to create feeding points. Now, the reason that they've said that, and what's been stated in the order as well, is that there's a certain belief that feeding randomly in different places on the streets is something that leads to dogs being territorial and then can lead to aggression. Since you're somebody who's had so much experience with working with dogs, how much merit does that argument have? Because you have a lot of fear that's being created when it comes to feeding dogs. And because of that, you end up seeing a lot of feeder harassment on the ground as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two sides of that. One side is if you're not a dog lover or you're just a regular person, I don't think it would be very enjoyable to have 10 dogs outside your house or your shop. Or if you have a young kids or a family, you don't want 5 street dogs running after you. Like, I'm the first person to absolutely admit that's not a viable solution. You know, you can't, it is a public health issue that you can't just have dogs uncontrolled everywhere. I don't believe that's a good system for anybody. And if protesters or dog lovers need to come together and find a solution. But on the other side, having designated feeding spots is like, you know, you can't tell the dog to arrive at 5:30 for its restaurant appointment for its food. Like, that's not how dogs work. They're free roaming. They might live in an alleyway. They might eat, you know, they might stay in a park. They might have a safe place during the evening. It's not very practical. And what I could see before I was leaving was that these designated feeding spots, I don't personally think would be something that would work very well. You know, keeping the dogs are not going to be able to know where the designated feeding spots are. It feels like it's something that's going to add more conflict, if I'm honest.
All right. So in your experience then, and considering you've been to Delhi for a few days, you've been able to take a cursory look at what the population is like, to a certain extent, at least in the capital. You've been able to see what the infrastructure is like, how people react to the dogs. There's even something that you tweeted about and posted about a dog that was being beaten by a group of men. Fortunately, you were able to step in along with other rescuers, and that dog is currently being treated as per your post. What kind of solutions, what kind of advice would you have maybe for people who are looking to solve this issue?
Well, it's very hard. And anybody who tells you differently is not telling you the truth. It's unfortunately, to fix it, you're going to need to have cooperation between the government, between animal lovers, between NGOs, between people, city planners, and it's going to take years. And if you want to do it in a humane and a science-backed way with really good outcomes for everybody, you need to have cooperation and you need to have population control. I'm the biggest dog lover there is, but there are too many dogs. It really is that simple. If you just let dogs roam and don't have sterilizing and don't have vaccinations and just leave a free for all, that's a really bad solution for the dogs and for the humans. So you need a science-backed, really coordinated approach, which is very, very hard to do because you need buy-in from everybody, both, you know, politically, financially, morally, everything, and it's a huge challenge.
You're also somebody who's dealt with aggressive dogs or dogs that have shown aggression. One of the biggest worries that we've been seeing from the side which is not keen to having dogs on the road is they're worried about bites, they're worried about aggressive dogs. What also tends to happen is misreporting when it comes to dogs, and sometimes, and what we've actually seen this being exhibited on an app that's been put forward by the MCD, which is the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, where a dog will be pinpointed and they will say that the dog is rabid. But there is a belief that a lot of dogs are rabid. How would you seek to maybe fact check that, or how would you respond to people who believe that every dog that they see is a danger?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult one because, I mean, it sounds, I saw on the ground, that's a system that is very open to abuse. I mean, if you don't like a dog, just call it rabid and just, you know, tag it in the app, and who's going to decide if the dog is rabid or not? You know, that's a very gray area. So I think there are definitely cases where dogs would be aggressive. I think the one big challenge that Delhi has is just the sheer size of the population and the fact that people live so closely packed on top of each other and the dogs have to find their space within there. That's where the conflict is. So I think having self-reporting like that is probably not going to be effective, because there's two sides of it. There's the people who love the dogs and the people who are not so fond of the dogs. So are people going to be good actors and report dogs accurately? Probably not.
Big question, yeah. You also had posted about a trip to a specific ABC unit, a sterilization unit, which is located in Delhi's Rohini area. Over the last few days, there have been protests. Specifically, there was one at around midnight for a few hours. It went on till about 5 a.m. And you had activists even being there on the ground for the next few days as well, because there was a belief going around that the dogs were being abused, they were being euthanized. Some even claimed that there was a dog meat trade lobby that was behind this. However, there's no verified information about a dog meat lobby at this point. However, there were videos where you can see and you can hear dogs which seem to be in peril. They're whining, they're uncomfortable. Tell us more about what you were able to see when you were there. What did you notice about that sterilization unit?
It was, without any exaggeration, one of the most haunting places I've ever been in my life. I was there the Saturday when the protests were at their highest, and I heard the dogs screaming. I saw the dogs coming and going. I saw the protesters trying to get the dogs out of there. I spoke to the protesters who had been inside. They took me across the road where we found skulls of many, many dogs in plain sight right across the road. And I saw really, really haunting images of, I don't know enough about the politics and the who owns the centres or MCD or the government or licenses, anything like that. I don't know the background of that, and I think there's a lot of speculation and maybe misinformation. But what I did see was just a really haunting place for dogs, and whatever was going on there felt really, really shady.
All right. Well, I think there is a big spotlight on that Rohini sterilization unit at this point because of what has been happening over the last few days. But back to your rescue work, I think one thing that we'd be curious to know is what inspired you to begin? Why are you running a shelter? Why do you decide to rescue dogs? And if there was one particular dog that may have inspired you, do tell us about that.
Yeah, I love dogs in general. They're just a wonderful creature, and I feel like they're voiceless. And that's why I jumped on the plane to Delhi, because there's a lot of great people there, and I wanted to help them get their voice out there. I started rescuing them, because they're voiceless. There was one dog, Tina, who got me. She was a golden retriever mother. She'd been chained up, and I saved her. And since then, we've actually sterilized 100,000 dogs. We fund sterilizing, which is, our charity gives money to people to sterilize dogs, and we've funded 100,000. So we think that's the answer. Rescuing dogs or adopting dogs will help a tiny bit, but the real solution is sterilizing at scale. So that's our mission.
So considering you were able to speak to feeders and other rescue workers in India, are there any gaps that you could identify which maybe could be focused on a bit more by rescuers and feeders?
Yes, sterilizing, government support. I mean, you can see from the coverage and stuff, it's like a war between humans. I mean, there's two different sides. The only way to fix it is to have collaboration and have a better community system for the dogs, and that's through sterilizing, vaccinating, and controlling the population. That's how the dogs will be happier, and ultimately the humans will be happier as well.
Many people have also spoken about the Netherlands model where that's concerned, having certain policies in place that encourage the adoption of indigenous breeds. In fact, there's actually one positive story that's been coming to light specifically from India in Shimla itself, where dogs are being fitted with GPS-enabled collars, I believe, and that's how they're planning on monitoring the dogs. Have you ever used a system like that with the dogs that you rescue? Is there a way that you can track and monitor the dogs?
Yeah, so when we will map an area of all the dogs, and when we get there, we sterilize them. We will put microchips in them so that we know their numbers. We will vaccinate them, and then everything is geotagged onto a map. So we go from area to area, and we'll try and get 95% coverage in an area. So that means that the population is covered. But one thing that shouldn't be underestimated is Delhi is just so big, and I know that is very, very obvious if you live there, but Netherlands or all these countries that have done it are, smaller confined areas. Like Delhi is, I think, 30 million people. I mean, it's a huge challenge is the problem. But I would put it up there, with pollution or garbage management. Like, it's a public health issue, and I think just the size of Delhi makes it a much, much bigger problem for you guys, unfortunately.
You are somebody who also works not just in Thailand, but you visited India, you have visited other countries as well. What are the takeaways that you would take from different places across the world when it comes to rescue work?
Yeah, I think there's problems everywhere in the world with dogs. Like, I mean, I was in America recently, and there's, I think there's up to 2 million dogs in shelters in America. So it's not like they have some magic solution. Sri Lanka, where I was recently, is we have a partner there, and it's that they don't even have the vet infrastructure. They're still catching. They may be just behind India. There's a lot of different cultural elements to every country, and what I find is there's dog lovers and people who don't like dogs in every country where I travel, and getting them to sort of it's a human problem. Getting them to agree and find solutions that are best for humans and dogs is very, very hard.
Have you been able to have success with that in Thailand?
Yeah, we work on the education side of things as well. So we make a lot of content online, so showing what's dangerous, how you should approach a dog, what to do if you're scared, how to treat dogs simply in the community. So yes, we've definitely seen progress, but it's not something that happens overnight. But we definitely are trying to change hearts and minds.
That's lovely. As a final question to you now, before we wrap it up, what kind of tips would you give, not just the feeders or rescuers, which we discussed a little while ago, but maybe considering that you also run your own shelter in Thailand, for those who maybe want to begin a shelter in India, or who maybe are even on the edge where they want to help dogs, they just don't know how to, what kind of advice would you give those people?
Well, I'll tell you, just do it, because I was in Delhi, and a young girl came up to me. I think she was about 19 years old, and she came up to me and she said, "Thank you for what you do. I've done the same as you have." And I'd never met her before or anything. And she said that she had gone to her college. There was 50 dogs in her college, and she'd seen what we do online, and she had fundraised herself, young girl, and she had sterilized all 50 dogs in her college. And she explained to me that her lecturers and her superiors were very dubious. They were like, "Let's just get rid of these dogs." And she said, "No, I've seen how to do it online." She sterilized all the dogs on a little spreadsheet. She has all the numbers, and she went back to her professors and everybody then, and it's now a happy, fully sterilized college in India full of dogs. So she went and did that, a young girl, on her own. So if she can do it, I think, anybody can do it.
Sometimes all it takes is one person to make a difference, right? Niall, thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you for all that you're doing. And when it comes to rescue work, because many, of course, have been inspired in the past and will, of course, continue to be inspired in the future by it. And we hope that the dogs at your Happy Doggo shelter continue to remain as happy as they are.
Thanks for having me, and good luck for you guys over there.
Thank you.